Hi, and welcome to Golden Isles TV. I'm your host, Avery Brooks. Today, we're talking to the city. It's the City Show for February. And we want to welcome Garo Alberson for Public Works for the City of Brunswick and Regina McDuffie, who is the City Manager for the City of Brunswick. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about city finances and how the operations of the city finances all worked so well together. So join us in just a moment here on Golden Isles TV. Well, welcome. We are with Garo Alberson from Public Works for the City of Brunswick and with Regina McDuffie, City Manager for the City of Brunswick. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I appreciate everybody's patience with these Zoom calls and these virtual shows. It is can be a little tricky sometimes, but we appreciate y'all joining us for this. So today we're talking about the city's method of financing your operations. So property taxes, et cetera. So Regina, Ms. McDuffie, would you like to start?
Yes. I think it's important for the public to understand how the city operates. And a lot of what we do, there's always a saying that, the taxpayers pay for what we do. So we want to make sure that they have a clear understanding of how the city functions, how the city operates, and how the city is funded. In looking at our budget for the 2021 fiscal year, the city budgeted $15.6 million of money to come in, and basically we pattern our expenditures based on the revenues. The revenues that we get come from property taxes, about 40%, and about 35% from sales tax, and then some other sources. We have some other taxes that are paid, and then there are charges and fees. And the important thing about that is that, when you talk about the taxpayers, they pay about 40% of what the city spends every year. The sales tax is another stream of revenue, but a lot of the sales tax comes from the visitors and people coming into the city that don't necessarily live here. And that's an important fact because, they are contributing, people who come in. So we love visitors. And the reason we love visitors is because they do spend a lot of money and pay the sales tax, which helps fund the city and the county. So that's one of the important facts, is to understand how that funding comes together to provide for the city operations. When you talk about the operations, of course, a lot of that is public safety. It's the fire department, it's the police department, and it's public works. About 60% of our funding goes towards those three areas of operation. And then the other 40% goes towards the general administration, the municipal court, the collection of taxes, and things like that. So those are what we talk about when we speak about the operations of the city. One of the other points I'd like to make is that, when you talk about operations, that's one part of the city's funding, but then you talk about capital funding. And capital funding is the overall spending of sales tax, which we get through the SPLOST, and that's the special purpose local option sales tax, which is different from the sales tax that we use on our operating. And it's very important, to understand the SPLOST funds that come in, because they fund all of the capital purchases, which are large purchases and large expenditures that the city makes. And that's one of the things. Garo has a lot of, oversight in looking at SPLOST projects and how that funding is spent once it's approved and allocated. And basically for the last SPLOST, which was in 2016, was it 2016, Garo?
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
Okay, that SPLOST generated, or it was expected to generate, about $13.8 million. And basically there are a lot of projects that were outlined in that particular SPLOST. And I'll let Garo speak a little bit about, the SPLOST projects that were included and the ones that have been completed and the ones that, have impacted the city over that time.
Thank you. we have a very old and aging infrastructure in the city. So a good portion of our SPLOST collection went towards storm drainage and milling and paving and reconstruction of roadways. Those were probably our two largest areas infrastructure wise. We have, with this SPLOST, we've been able to do a large resurfacing project. We got about 12 miles of neighborhood streets resurfaced around town. We were also able to complete the L Street project. That was just completed earlier this month. We finished that up. Thankful to get that one done. And now our next project we're beginning right now is the Magnolia Park project, which is a residential neighborhood off Altama near Brunswick High School. We'll be repairing the roadways or reconstructing the roadways in that neighborhood. And then on the storm drainage side of things, some of our storm drainage money also went to these similar projects. We had a portion of our storm drainage money that went towards the L Street project to eliminate the flooding problems along that street. A portion of our storm drainage money will also go to this Magnolia Park project that we're beginning right now. And that project's estimated to take about a year to complete. A good bit of our money will go there. And we're also setting aside some money for the construction of the College Park drainage outfall. We've begun a project to study and design improvements for the College Park neighborhood to eliminate the flooding there. And the first phase of that is a new outfall, which would parallel the spur. And we're finalizing the design of that phase right now, and we've set aside some money in our drainage category under this SPLOST for construction of that. That's a joint project with the county, so we've set aside money for our portion of that construction. Some of the other projects that we've been able to complete are we've done some work on some historic squares. We've been able to do some survey work and establish the boundaries and clearly define the boundaries of several historic squares downtown. And we're beginning redevelopment of Queen Square Northeast right now. That's at the northeast quadrant of Newcastle Street and Mansfield Street, kind of diagonal across from Old City Hall. We've also done a good bit of sidewalk repair around town. We've been able to remove and replace a good bit of concrete sidewalk around town. We've also done a large project to remove a lot of ADA and trip hazards there and make our sidewalks around town safer. We've been able to add a new bay to the fire station on Gloucester Street. We were able to make some improvements to the kitchen area and vestibule enclosure at the Senior Center on I Street. That project was completed about a year ago. We were able to install a restroom facility at Overlook Park, and we're currently working to install a restroom facility at Liberty Ship Park, which is under the Sidney Lanier Bridge, trying to work out the details of delivery of that facility here in the next few days, hopefully, and that will be in place. We've got several park improvements that we've been able to work on with this SPLOST. One of those is at Howard Coffin Park. We've gotten a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, so we're using our SPLOST money to match that grant to extend our funds a little further. We've done some improvements at the pool, and we're finalizing the details of a new playground and pavilion over there, and we'll be repairing the walking track over there at Howard Coffin Park. We also are able to do some work. We're currently working on a project for some improvements at various parks around town. Goodyear Park, College Park, Orange Square, Palmetto Square, several of those that may have playgrounds or some smaller facilities in those. We're going to make some repairs, and a couple of them will be replacing the playgrounds and bring those parks up to speed as to where they need to be. We're also currently working on the wayfinding project. That is a project with the joint project with the county and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, for wayfinding signage to provide a consistent signage around town to direct motorists to different landmarks around town. We're finalizing the design of our portion of that project right now, and we're hopeful we can get installation of this completed later this spring. One other project that we're working on is, the category is Highway 17 infrastructure. We will use some of that money to match another grant that we received for landscape improvements at the intersection of 4th Avenue and Highway 17, just after you come north off of the Lanier Bridge, kind of a smaller version of the Gateway project that we did at Gloucester Street a few years back. And then we'll also use some of that money to match a grant for design of the boardwalk trail, which would be an extension of the trail along 17 between Overlook Park and the St. Simon's Causeway on the east side of the highway there. And so this will help match the design portion of that project. So, yes,
go
ma'am.
ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, with all those, we've been able to accomplish a lot in this SPLOST. We still have a few projects, like I mentioned, the Magnolia Park and the Highway 17 project that are just now getting kicked off. So it's going to be a little bit before we finalize those, but we're very thankful for this, and certainly would not be able to do all of this work without this SPLOST funding.
And what I was going to say was, even if you don't remember all of the things that Darrell just listed, you can see that there are so many different projects that are being, administered by the city or implemented, and, a lot going on. But the biggest point is that, these projects, once they're done, it's not like we're finished with, repairing the infrastructure, or, we never finish paving all the roads or repaving or restriping. These are ongoing projects, and that's one of the reasons why it's, very important for the SPLOST funding to continue. We are looking right now, the county and city, at a new SPLOST that will be put on the referendum for March. And basically, a lot of it will be continuation of the projects that we're already starting, such as the roads and drainage. About 70% of the new SPLOST will be dedicated to infrastructure, which includes the roads, drainage, and the trails, and some of the other landscaping and things like that we have along our roadways. One of the things that Gerald did mention is the acquisition of equipment. And the SPLOST also includes, purchasing fire trucks, police cars, public works equipment. And as you know, as we use that equipment, there are always repairs and there's always replacements needed. So it's not a thing that once we do it or replace it, that it ends. There's a continuation of need for our equipment to be upgraded or our equipment to be replaced. So that's always included in the SPLOST as well. One of the questions that I always get sometimes from city employees is, how can we buy new fire trucks and new police cars, but we can't give raises some years? Well, the difference is that operating money can be used for raises, and capital money can only be used for capital expenses. And so even if we have capital money to pay for new police cars and new fire trucks, it does not mean that we have operating money, to support the raises. And a lot of times that question, is confusing for taxpayers and for employees, because they don't recognize the difference between those operating expenses and the capital expenses. But that's one of the things that, I try and help, clarify and clear up, and especially in terms of when we're looking at SPLOST dollars. And again, one of the important things about the SPLOST is that this is special purpose local option sales tax. And sales tax, again, is paid 60% of it comes from people visiting or people coming into the city and county and spending money and then going home. So that's an important aspect of our funding. 60% of those dollars are funded by people who basically doesn't even live here.
Wow. Well, this is a ton of information and all good. It sounds like the SPLOST dollars are going all to excellent projects, like you said, that have been happening, but are continuing to happen. It's an ongoing situation. So thank you for clarifying that. All the projects sound great. It's interesting to see the percentages. So much goes to infrastructure or goes to repair, goes to construction, just to maintain, like you said, the roads, the sidewalks, the parks. So, and of course, along making improvements, but also just to maintain.
Yeah, there's no shortage of work to be done, no doubt about it.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like maybe an old house where it's just it's always great, and but it always needs something.
That's right. Always work to be done.
Always work to be done. Yeah. Well, talk a little bit. I know people are very curious about specifically the L Street project. So, Garo, do you want to address that a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. This one we're certainly glad to finish up. We went in there, and I mean, everybody that's ever been here knows that's been a major problem around town for years, with the condition of the road as well as the flooding. So we went in and we completely tore out the road, completely replaced the storm drainage system. We added larger pipes, larger inlets to go ahead and collect that water and pull that storm water off of the road. And then we came in and completely rebuilt the road. It wasn't just a resurfacing job. We tore the old road completely out, replaced it from the subgrade all the way up. So it's a brand new road with brand new curb and gutter there. So it's draining well. It's a nice ride, a nice smooth ride, which I've never lived here and seen it without potholes, especially down near the stadium end. So it's definitely nice to have that one done. It did take us a while. We had a couple of delays, but we're certainly glad to get that one finished up and move on to the next one now.
And one of the points I would like to make about the upcoming SPLOST that we're planning, as I said, about probably 70% of it is part of its storm drainage and roads improvement. And we have had a storm drainage master plan developed, which gives us specific information about some of the priority projects that need to be done. And we're going to be using that master plan as a guide for the expenditures that we make in the next SPLOST if it's approved. And also we have had a roads assessment done, which will tell us the condition of every mile of roads in the city. That particular study and report we're looking at finalizing, and it will give us information going forward so that we will be, again, able to prioritize and look at the road conditions and make specific, allocations of funds for the roads that we feel are, in the worst conditions or are used more by most of the citizens, and those kind of decisions from that assessment. So the city's not, going out blindly and doing projects. We're actually looking at prioritizing and making sure that we're putting our money in the places that it's needed the most.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything is carefully thought out. Studies are done and making sure that the money is going only to the right places at the right time. So that's excellent to know. And tell me a little bit about history. Everyone in the Golden Isles loves the history of the Golden Isles and loves when things are, like you were saying, the squares and things like that. Tell us what portion of money might go to more historic projects.
Well, I'll just say that we have a group that the Signature Squares group, and they are very, very good. They have been raising money to assist the city in the renovation and maintenance of the squares. And I think the squares are so very important to the development of downtown, to provide, things for the citizens as well as the visitors that come into the city. And Gerald can tell you some more specifics, but I really think the squares are very important, not only to the history of the city, revitalization of the city.
Right. We, as we mentioned, we're kicking off the Queen Square Northeast project. And that's a project that's intended to kind of mirror the northwest quadrant of that, where there's already a monument out there with some brick walkways and some nice landscaping there. So that project will be ongoing this spring. We're also working on the Wright Square project. We used our SPLOST money for some of the design of that project. We'll actually use some grant money that we receive from GDOT every year, local maintenance improvement grant money, for the construction of that project. But that is intended to combine the two halves of Wright Square and sort of make a bookend, I guess, if you will, to Hanover Square, which is a few blocks away, with the type of monument or water feature in the center and a nice sort of a 2-block square there. We've also done some work for our smaller squares downtown, which a lot of people may not even realize those smaller squares are tucked into these neighborhoods. They're not very big, and they're sort of passive parks, I guess, if you will. But we've done some work to establish those, make sure those are clearly delineated, put up some bollards to prevent parking and that kind of thing in those, and help to protect those, so that we're kind of a little better prepared with the next SPLOST. We can implement some improvements in those squares, whether it be landscaping, benches, seating areas, and that kind of thing, and start to improve those parks a little bit going forward as well.
And speaking of history, we also use some of our capital funding to support maintenance of our cemeteries. Oak Grove Cemetery, there has been some fencing repairs and some other upgrades that we've done in the cemeteries, and trying to keep them, in good shape going forward.
Right. I was just thinking, I guess SPLOST is different than the CDBG money. I guess, does that play into any of this sort of revitalization effort downtown?
One of the things that we use the CDBG. There's a joint project that we're doing right now to do sidewalks and some sidewalk improvements and repairs. But the CDBG is another pot of money that the city gets, and we generally do a lot of housing improvement and helping with housing infrastructure. Gerald may have a little bit more information on that as well.
Right. She mentioned the CDBG project we're currently working on for sidewalks. We've done some sidewalks around Palmetto Square. We're currently working on O Street right now, and then we'll be moving to Gordon Street next week. And these are installing new sidewalks in areas where there are not currently any sidewalks at all. This is not a replacement project. This is a new construction of sidewalks. CDBG Community Development Block Grant Program can be a little restricted because it is sort of restricted by the median income of an area. Those funds can only be used, or for the construction side like this, in areas where the median income is below a certain level. So whereas you don't have that restriction as SPLOST can be used anywhere in the city. So.
And that's a good point to make, because, the money that the city gets, like I said, operating money can only be used for operating purposes. Mostly capital funds are restricted to capital purchases. And then we have grant funds that we get either from the Land and Water Conservation Fund or from CDBG, and those have restrictions as well. So the city has to work within whatever parameters are set for the money that it's using. And that's, we have to stay very conscientious of how the money's spent and how the process are conducted, because we have to meet certain requirements for grant and other funds.
Right. She mentioned the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We've been able to take advantage of a couple of those grants for our playground improvements. we're working on one at Howard Coffin Park. We also applied for the one at Orange Square for the improvements there. We've also got a couple of coastal incentive grants that we've gotten through local DNR and able to do some design of our storm drainage system and try to reduce runoff and improve flooding conditions around town with those. And then sometimes we're able to turn that into another 319 grant from local EPD and implement the projects that were designed through the coastal incentive grant program. So sort of piggyback one grant to another, but it allows us to be able to stretch our funding out a little further and get a little more projects done through the use of these grants as well.
Right. Excellent. So everybody's working together to try to, maximize every dollar, using it in the right way, but being conscientious of the purpose of each project. I like what you were saying, Ms. McDuffie, about tourism and the fact that, so many of the dollars are made through people coming to visit. And so maybe at some point, I know there's so much to do and so much infrastructure to take care of, but at some point it might be fun to, and I know y'all have probably already done this, but to just investigate what projects could be done to bring more tourists to downtown Brunswick.
Yes, the investment that we're making into Mary Ross Park and hopefully going to, do some improvements there as well as in our squares and in our other park, as well as the trails that we're developing at Overlook and the Martin Luther King. Those are things that we hope, visitors will be attracted to, making better bicycle routes and things like that. One of the things I wanted to mention specifically is that the SPLOST dollars, they are not just city dollars, they are county dollars. They also have joint water and sewer. They benefit from the SPLOST dollars as well as Jekyll and St. Simon Islands. So it's not just the city that benefits from it, it's the county and these other entities, and they are all, working together, and they have just as many projects and things going on as the city does. And a lot of it is to, improve our infrastructure, but it's also to improve the city and county so that residents, visitors will have a great place to live, play, and come to visit.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, it's all the dollars are going to good use, and we so appreciate your reports today. Very detailed and a lot of information that I think people want to know. Where does my SPLOST dollar go? So it's so important to inform everyone, and we just appreciate that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and we certainly, I appreciate Gerald. He has done a yeoman's job of keeping up with a lot of these projects and trying to get them started and completed. So there's a lot of work that goes into this, and it takes a lot of manpower and time and energy. So I'm thankful to have him so engaged in this process as well. Hope that people, the taxpayers and people who watch the show, are well informed about the city's operations and our capital expenditures, and that they can, contact our offices if they have questions. We'll be glad to help them and provide information.
A lot of good people doing a lot of good things. So we appreciate the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate
Thanks for having us.
the opportunity.
Thank you. See you next time on Golden Isles TV.
Thank you.